You are the taxpayer. It is you. It is your money. So when you get your salary every month and you see how much is going in tax, maybe you're self-employed and at the end of the year you have a big tax bill in January and maybe another one in July that you have to hand over. Maybe you're someone who is taking some money from a pension and you pay tax every time you do that. How do you feel in the context of all of these freebies? 0344 499 1000. Call and tell me how it makes you feel every time you see that money going from your salary every month, knowing that there are many of the things, many of the essentials you need to buy out of that money that's been taxed already, that Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, many others don't even need to think about. Clothing. I mean, one of those basic essentials that you need to buy out of your salary. They get theirs given to them. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. And we've got a couple of spaces on the board now if you want to get your call in. So, William Yarwood is Media Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance. So, William, morning to you. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us here on Talk. And congratulations, by the way. Keir Starmer saved you a fortune by going into that VIP box in Arsenal. So congratulations. You must, from the Taxpayers Alliance, you must be thrilled that he saved you all of this money on security.
Oh, naturally. I mean, Keir Starmer is pretending that he's doing us a favour by saying this. But the real problem with all of this, Cristo, is that in opposition, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves were both so pious about Tory sleaze and freebies. I remember back in 2021 when there was a scandal regarding Boris Johnson's Downing Street flat where he'd failed to declare some rather expensive wallpaper. And you know what Keir Starmer called him? He called him major sleaze and made a massive issue of it, both in the press and indeed in the House of Commons. And now he's doing more or less exactly the same thing. He's writing it off as, actually, guys, I'm doing you, taxpayers, British taxpayers, a favour. And quite frankly, I just don't think it's washing.
And, I mean, let's talk about this in the context of tax, because this is why I wanted to talk to you guys, actually, because I don't think we've heard the perspective of the juxtaposition between paying tax every month, which we're all doing at the highest level in history, and even by Labour's own figures, in this current Labour Parliament, we are going to be paying more in the history of tax paying. It's just the most dreadful optics when people are needing to buy those essentials themselves, and Labour don't even need to worry about any of them. If people want to spend their money on a concert ticket, Labour don't need to worry about that. If they want to spend their money on a nice suit because they've got an occasion coming up, Labour don't need to worry about that. Want to go on holiday and they need somewhere to stay, Labour don't need to worry about that because a luxury penthouse from a crony. Do you think that is part of the problem here? That it's about people thinking that it's one rule for them when it comes to what they get free, but it's another rule for us when it comes to the tax money we've got to hand over?
Yeah, Cristo, you're completely and utterly correct. I mean, as you said there, we're currently in the UK, a 70-year high tax burden. And actually, more depressingly, by the end of this decade, that's going to be an 80-year high tax burden, especially if nothing is done to unfreeze tax thresholds, which is dragging many people into higher rates of tax that they previously wouldn't have had to pay. And also, like you mentioned about, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves getting donated clothes. Well, guess what? Average taxpayers don't have big Labour Party donors in which to rely on in order to make sure that they have clothing on their back and or glasses to wear. But the real problem here is about the pious nature of the previous of Starmer and Rachel Reeves when they were in opposition, and now they're doing exactly the same thing. But the issue is they don't actually seem to care all that much in reality about it. They think they actually are doing us a favour. And what they will say, we're doing taxpayers a favour, but come the autumn budget, they won't be doing taxpayers a favour when they hike inheritance tax, capital gains, possibly even national insurance. So it's the hypocrisy that really gets me.
And I'm so glad you said that, because that's the other audacious thing about what he's had to say there, is that I'm doing this to save taxpayers' money. Well, if you're interested in saving taxpayers' money, why is your Chancellor talking about putting up capital gains tax? Why is your Chancellor wanting to get their sticky little fingers on people who've put money into their pension pots? Why is your Chancellor talking about raising inheritance tax and all those other taxes? I mean, that's what taxpayers are worried about, not so much about this apparent security bill.
No, quite right. I mean, regarding capital gains tax, if they do hike that up even by just 1%, the Treasury's own stats show that it's going to cost the Exchequer 100 million quid a year. So it's actually not going to raise any money. All it's going to do is drive wealth creators and prosperity out of this country. And I think, again, another key part of Labour's hypocrisy here is they constantly bang on about growth and productivity, and yet all they want to do is seem to tax the people who are the growth creators and the most productive people in our economy. I mean, regarding inheritance tax, I mean, people on the upper end of society have always managed to avoid inheritance tax via long-term tax planning. It's always the middle classes that get hurt by inheritance tax. It's never the richest people in Britain. And also the other issue I think might come up is regarding national insurance. Now, Rachel Reeves bangs on about this £22 billion black hole, which of course she's now doing, she's now slamming pensioners because of course it's their fault that somehow, this £22 billion black hole exists, when in reality it exists because Rachel Reeves has decided to give it to her trade union mates, as well as fund a bunch of new quangos such as GB Energy and the National Wealth Fund. But the issue is that she thinks that, this £22 billion black hole needs to be filled. And I've got a slight sneaking suspicion, Cristo, even though they said they wouldn't raise national insurance in the election, I have a slight sneaking suspicion they might reverse the 4% cut, because if you reverse the 4% cut, you just about get 22 billion quid.
And you're not raising it from the last government, you're just not keeping the cut that they get. So that they I wouldn't put it past them to try and to sneak that in. We've heard today, looking ahead to the Labour conference, that Angela Rayner is going to open the conference by talking about these renters' reforms, which she's claiming is going to help the property market, the rental market. Isn't this a real issue? Because, of course, at the moment we've got these rental reforms coming, right, which is going to potentially hammer landlords. I'm a landlord, so I know a little bit about this. Also, it was reported earlier this week that landlords could be facing a £90,000 capital gains tax bill under a Labour shake-up of the country's tax system. If a property was bought before 2005, there would be a really big chunk, I think a 67% increase that would equate to. We're trying to balance that with how it actually helps people in their day-to-day life. That's not going to help people. That's actually not going to help renters, is it?
No, not at all. And as you mentioned, I mean, the capital gains tax is going to hit those landlords very, very, very hard. But like I said, it's not going to raise all that much money at all. I mean, another part of Reeves and Rayner's and Starmer's growth plan is, of course, building more houses, which is not something I necessarily disagree with or think is unwelcome. But the problem is you can't then decide to build houses and then strap extra regulation and extra red tape and extra taxes on landlords, because in order to actually have houses, you need to have people who actually own those houses and lease those houses out, such as landlords. So actually what you would be doing there is you're going to hike up rents, which is going to hurt, people, renting all across the country. For example, I live in London. Rents are already very high here. Imagine what the average postgraduate is going to find when he moves to London and has to get on the property ladder. And it's also going to hurt landlords themselves, who in many cases might just decide to throw their arms up and go, you know what, I'm not bothering anymore, I'm just going to get rid of my housing, rather than actually engaging in that market. So yeah, I mean, Reeves and Rayner's and Starmer's plans, they say one thing and then they do another.
It's ideological. It's ideological over practical, and that seems to be the real worry I have here. I was saying earlier, so I'm a landlord and one of my flats is up for rent at the moment, right? And I've never had more inquiries. I've been deluged by inquiries, firstly, which is, again, great for me as one of the landlords who's remaining in the market, even though I'm getting hammered on tax. But secondly, I've never had more inquiries from people saying, my landlord's selling, that's the reason that I'm looking for somewhere. And I've never, ever had that before. So clearly, and what that's doing is it's making some people come to me, and again, I'm not saying this as woe is me, but I've had someone offer me 6 months rent in advance. I've had people almost, trying to offer me more to start with because they just want to get in the door. Now, that's not helping tenants. That's not helping people who rent. And I can't understand the short-sightedness of this government that think that reducing the supply of something is going to help people pay less for it. It's the most basic backward economics you could get.
Completely, and we've had this for decades now. We've always had a demand slide sort of bent in our economics for the last God knows how many years, which is why the housing supply is so constricted and why rents are so high. But yeah, I mean, if Reeves and Rayner and Starmer actually want to grow this economy, and I welcome their house building projects and I welcome the fact that they seem to be actually interested in growth, they need to make sure that they don't just engage in ideological red meat kind of stuff, such as capital gains tax and the renters reform bill, if they actually want to have growth in this country. Not to say that the last Conservative government did anything regarding growth. I mean, this renters reform bill is actually in many ways a carryover from the same kind of bill that Sunak and Gove passed in the last parliament, or attempted to pass in the last parliament, that is. So they're both sides of the same coin, really. But yeah, it's taxpayers, it's landlords, it's pensioners. I mean, who are they going to come after next?
Just finally as well, just one other aspect of what we're going to hear about, I think, at conference, and that is more on the private school VAT raid. It's in the news today that apparently it could hit 4 UK areas harder than anywhere else, and the areas are outlined. One's Bristol, one's a few others. If you are, and the reason is because people won't be able to afford the VAT, which is of course a tax. They're going to therefore have to take their children out of the private education, put them into the state system, and the state system is already at saturation in some of these areas that are outlined. In fact, people might want to know the areas, so I'm going to outline them. Richmond upon Thames, Camden, Bristol and Salford. Now, Keir Starmer on the front page of today's Mirror and various other papers saying no more austerity. Well, if you are trying to fit more pupils into a state school with the same resources, how can you say there's not austerity? Because that's austere. You're trying to do more with fewer resources, which was what happened in austerity.
Yeah, quite, Christy, completely correct. And also the issue with the VAT on private schools, which people miss out, is actually this is going to hit military schools and actually special educational needs schools as well. And, you know, people in special educational needs schools, you know, they need, you know, the special attention that they need extra help, you know, they need the resources. And Starmer, in his, you know, ideological way, is just shrugging his shoulders and going, you know what, a VAT in private schools sounds good to Labour Party members and Labour Party voters, so I'll implement it, despite the fact that it won't raise all that much money and will cost the Exchequer more than it brings in. And also, like I said, it will hit schools. You know, it won't just hit the Etons and the Harrows of this world, but, you know, your military colleges and your special educational needs schools. But yeah, I mean, how on earth he thinks he's going to solve the school crisis by, you know, basically destroying the private school sector and indeed removing school choice from parents and then having to put them in comprehensive school, which, like you said, are already oversubscribed anyway. It makes completely no sense to me. I'd really like to know what's going on in Reeves and Starmer's brain where they concocted this policy, but I think in all reality, Cristo, it is pure ideology and nothing more.
I really fear you're right, and that worries me more than anything else we hear, because it means that ideological warfare is more important to them than practical economics that will make us more prosperous, and that is disastrous for us as a nation. Listen, really good to talk to you. Well, I think really good. I'm quite depressed now, I'm afraid, but nice to see you anyway. That's William Yarwood, media manager at the Taxpayers Alliance.